You can't lose when you go with the flow, and you can't win when you go against it. It's just that simple. It does not matter what you use as your excuse to beat the drum that makes you feel bad. You know, people don't get cancer because they write, I'm going to get cancer, I'm going to get cancer, I'm going to get cancer. People often get diseases that they haven't even heard of. And it isn't because they were beating the drum of that disease. It's because they were beating the drum of this injustice and this injustice and this injustice. They were mad about that and about that and about that and about that and about that. They were using thing after thing after thing after thing after thing as their reason to go against their flow. And when you go against the flow of well-being, you don't let well-being in. There is not a source of sickness. There is not a source of evil. There is not a source of darkness. You don't walk into a room and look for a dark switch. You don't expect to flip a switch which makes misty, inky darkness cover the light. You don't worry when you open the closet that the darkness of the closet will come out and cover up the light in the room. You know that there is a source of light which can be resisted. And we want you to understand that there is well-being which you can resist. And there's health that you can resist, and there's abundance that you can resist. And the way you feel is your indication of this overall stream. Now, the reason that we're talking to you in the way that we are is because we want you to get the sense of all of the different flows that are in your experience. In other words, there's your overall flow of well-being. And then there's the flow of your dominant relationship. And then there's the flow of your financial money. And then there's the flow of your physical body. And then there's the flow of your work environment. And then there's the flow with the person that sits closest to you at work. And then there's the flow of the way you feel about your boss. You've got all of these currents flowing within all of these currents. And whatever you're focused upon in any moment dominates your vibration. So, what about someone who has a physical body that's working well, and a relationship that's working well, and money that's flowing pretty good, and source energy who adores them, and a planet where the sun comes up every morning, and a planet where there is an abundance of food, especially in their environment, and they have a thing going on with somebody at work, and that's what they think about. They think about it when they wake up. They think about it when they go to bed. They think about it while they eat their meals. And they talk to their mate about it until he doesn't want to come home anymore. In other words, that's what they think about it. They are completely consumed. And it's not hard to understand because they sit next to this obnoxious person for 8 hours every day. And it finally got to them. In other words, it's easy to understand. But that one relationship is a very small part of their overall flow when they look at it objectively. But it is getting 95% of the airtime of what they focus upon. And so this person is using that relationship as their excuse to disallow the energy from flowing in all areas of their life, and then they end up sick. And then they say, oh, how could this happen to me? And we say, how could it not happen to you? You're using something as your excuse to push against the stream. Now you've got all kinds of things that are pulling energy through you, all kinds of life experience that's got a very strong current pulling through you, and yet you are pulling against this very strong current. It's going to beat you up, you see. So when you begin to understand that you have this flow, and we're not wanting to put it to you in anything that would feel to you like a threatening sense, because you are so free you can choose bondage. We're just wanting to point out to you that you really don't have any choice other than to go with the flow if you care about feeling good. If you care about success, and if you care about thriving, and if you care about abundance, and if you care about laughing and joy, if you care about feeling good, you have no choice but to go with the flow, because the entire universe, everything that has come before you and everything that is you now is moving toward that flow. And when you go with that flow, you thrive, you see. And you know that you're thriving because in the moment you are feeling joy or something that is improved from what you were feeling before. Well, so that's our sales pitch. We want you to reach for the feeling of worthiness. But for some of you, that's a pretty big jump. We want you to hear the appeal we've made to your logic. And we want you to understand that everything that we've spoken here is based upon our knowledge of the laws of the universe. We know your goodness, and we know your value, and we know your reason for being. And we feel nothing but appreciation for your willingness to take thought beyond that which it has been before. And we acknowledge that no matter what you're doing about your flow, that you are contributing as individuals mightily to all that is becoming. And as representatives of source energy, we want to offer you our complete appreciation for the expansion that you are providing. But it's up to you whether you let yourself right now be the recipient of what is waiting for you in vibrational escrow. And that's the whole point of this gathering. We call it the art of allowing. And it is the art of allowing myself, by virtue of the thoughts that I'm choosing right now in this moment, to become a vibrational match to the vibrational escrow that the consequences of life have provided. The consequences of the life before I came into this body, the consequences of the life that I've lived in this body, the sifting and the sorting and the molding of the clay. Before you came into this body, you were one powerful vibrational stream. And we want you to understand that in this determination that we are beginning to feel within so many of you here, to utilize your guidance system more effectively, it's an easy thing to do because your guidance system is based on the same thing that all guidance is based upon, 2 points of vibrational relativity. Jerry and Esther have a variety. They are purchasing their 4th navigational system now. Different one in every vehicle. They all have different advantages. But they all operate on the premise that the system knows where you are, and then you program in your desired destination, and the system calculates the route between where you are and where you want to be and gives you verbal and visual description. So Magellan never says to Jerry and Esther, where have you been? It doesn't matter. Magellan never complains, well, you can't get there from there. Magellan never says, I told you yesterday and you didn't listen, now I'm not going to tell you. In other words, 2 simple functions. Where are you in relationship to where you want to be? And your guidance system operates on these 2 vibrational relationships. And here's what we mean by that. So here's where you are, and where you are is where you are. That's worth writing down. Where I am is where I am. This is my starting point. This is where I am, and I can get from where I am to anywhere I want to be, but here's where I am. So now the next question is, where do you want to be? And that question you've already answered, because life experience has caused you to say, I want more money, and I want a bigger house, and when I'm rude, I want to be less rude, and when somebody's rude to me, I want them to not be rude, and I want my children to be joyful, and I want them to respect me, and I want to respect them, and I want our government to be responsible, and I want it to do kind things, and I want to be a nation of humanitarianism, and all day, every day, life is causing you, I want. Your preferences are being born just the way you knew they would be. And so, as these desires are launched, Source becomes a perfect vibrational match to what you're asking for. Even if you are the one-celled organism, Source trusts that from your perspective, you ought to know. Even if you are a cell in a human body or in a frog, when that cell has exposure to contrast, it prefers something, and Source says you ought to know and flows to it. In other words, that's how the evolution of all species occurs. And so Source becomes one with this expanded idea. That's one point of vibrational relativity. The question is, where am I in relationship to it? If I'm complaining and beating the drum of where I am, then there's a wide crevasse between that which I've become and that which I'm allowing myself to be right here and now. You follow? So when you understand that there are always these 2 points of vibrational relationship that are playing off of each other, then you understand that there is allowing, which is one vibration, or there is less allowing, which is a splitting of vibration. So when you were in your non-physical form prior to coming forth into this physical body, you were offering one powerful vibrational stream. Now, to be fair, we have to say to you that even in non-physical, there is vibrational contrast. But the vibrational contrast is not perceivable from your human form. In other words, of course, everything is expanding, and so there must be opportunity for all to expand, even that which is non-physical. We are expanding through what you are living. But from your perspective, this vibration that is source is a pure vibrational stream. And when you were born into your physical body, from that non-physical energy, you were one vibrational stream. In the moment that you were born, separation in your vibration to a certain extent, just by your exposure to the vibrational environment into which you were born. That's why babies cry when they're born. We're not kidding you. We always expect more of a response from you about that, because we think it is a revelation worth contemplating. You worry so much when someone dies. Dying is a piece of cake. It's being born that's hard. Coming from pure positive energy into the chaotic environment of planet Earth, you should have funerals when they're born and parties when they die, because when they die, they reemerge back into pure positive energy. They come back into that one stream, you see. So you're pure energy, then you're born. Then you go to sleep, you're one stream again. Then you wake up, it's split. Most humans, the longer you live, the greater the expanse between who you really are and who you allow yourself to be, as you find yet another thing and another thing and another thing to fuss and worry about. Then you become enlightened and you learn how to meditate. You become one vibration. That's what happens in meditation. When you meditate, you quiet your mind. When you quiet your mind, you stop thought. When you stop thought, you stop resistant thought, and you become one vibration. That's why it is of advantage to you. Same thing happens when you sleep, but the advantage of meditating and doing it is that you are awake and therefore viscerally aware of the improvement in your vibrational status, where when you slumber, you just withdraw consciousness and you become one vibration. So this crevasse that we are demonstrating here between alignment with who you are or not is the same crevasse of this emotional scale. In other words, it's the vibrational disparity between who you really are and who you have become and who you are allowing yourself to be right here in this moment. And as you begin to contemplate this and you begin to understand that in every moment, no matter what's happening, you have the opportunity to close that gap. And we will admit that sometimes it's easier than others. And we will also admit wholeheartedly that when you're down here in a vibration that feels awful and some bright, shiny person is up here feeling wonderful and telling you that you ought to be up there too, you just want to kill them. In other words, you can't hear them and they can't hear you. Because in the same way that you can't set your radio dial on 6:30 a.m. and hear what's being played on 98.7 FM, there are different vibrational frequencies and they have to line up. And if they don't line up, then there's no communication. You are responsible for your own crack. And when you get it, that you are responsible for the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and you begin with the first thing that shows its negative emotional self to you, and you do your best to find relief, you're going to discover empowerment beyond our ability to describe it in words. You're going to discover control of all things that matter to you. Deliberate, creative control. And when you use any other method of control, when you try to control your mate, when you try to control your gardeners, when you try to control your government, when you try to control your kids, when you try to control your neighbors, when you try to control anyone, you are going to feel again and again powerless. When you discover the control that only comes through managing your own vibration, you will discover for your first time ever what absolute freedom is. Well, we've gone on and on and on. We will take a segment of refreshment, and then we will talk about anything that is important to you. You are doing very well. We are.